Hey everyone, Mr. A here. Hope everyone's doing good so far today. So in today's video, we are going to be going over having our sprite move along with some animations and our backdrop switching, right? So let's go ahead and get that started. So if we're gonna have our sprite move, one thing we have to take into account is that our stage is set up in an XY plane, right? So you probably heard about your XY plane in your math class. So if I'm moving left and right, that is on the X axis. And if I'm moving up and down, that will be on the Y axis, right? So let's go ahead and get that set up. So I'm going to create a new line of code. And anytime you create a new line of code, remember that we need an events block. So I'm going to go ahead and grab when space key is pressed. So the first thing I will be doing is have my sprite move to the right first. So how do we get that set up? So if I go ahead and click on this drop down menu, I will be having my sprite move right when I press on my right arrow. So now when I press the right arrow, my sprite will be moving to the right. But when I press my right arrow, nothing happens because we have yet to program it to do anything. So as I mentioned earlier, if we're moving to the right, that is on the x-axis, right? But another thing you have to take into account that since I'm moving to the right, that is also in the positive direction, right? So we will be changing x by 10. So now when I press my right arrow, now my sprite moves to the right by 10. So now let's go ahead and create another line of code for moving left. And for this case, I will have, if my left arrow is pressed, right, I will change x by minus 10 this time around, right? Because now I am moving to the left of the x-axis, so that is the negative direction. So now when I press my left arrow, now I am moving to the left. But one thing that you do notice is that the sprite moves a little laggy, right? So the reason why this happens is because anytime you initiate your code by pressing the right arrow, it runs the code, it stops and resets, right? So it's constantly resetting, so causing that lag in between movement, right? So I see how it starts to lag and then it picks up. What is one thing we can do to fix this issue? So let's go over that now. So if we go to our control blocks and grab the if then statement, right? But anytime you start a new line of code, you also need an events block, right? So now I have it where when my green flag is pressed, I have the if then statement. So what is this if then statement? As a quick example, the if then statement works on a condition basis. So for example, if Mr. A is hungry, then Mr. A will eat, right? Since the condition is true, I will go eat, right? So let's go ahead and program that. So let's have it where if my right arrow is pressed, then move to the right. So if we go to our sensing blocks and grab that key space pressed, so this is just saying which key is being pressed. So if I'm moving to the right, go ahead and select my right arrow. And if my right arrow is pressed, then we move x by 10. So now we have that set up. So now we click a green flag and notice how my sprite is not doing anything. So if you take a closer look, if when I click that green flag, my code lights up and then turns off for like a millisecond. So that happens because when we use any if then statements, it asks the question one time. So it asks the question one time and then the code ends. So what's something out there we can use to constantly you ask the question over and over and over? Something we like to call a forever loop. So the forever loop will be on the control block. So we're going to wrap this statement in a forever loop. The reason why we do that, since it's in a forever loop, it will forever ask the question if my right arrow was pressed, right? So now when I go ahead and click on my right arrow, see how smooth that was? So let's go ahead and do it for the left arrow now. Another cool thing you can do is if you don't want to go ahead and find all the blocks once again, go ahead and duplicate, right? Because it's the same code, but we're going to be changing a couple things. So now we're going to be moving to the left. So we're going to go ahead and switch that to left arrow. But remember, since we're moving to the left, that's going to the negative direction, right? So now we're going to change x by -10, right? So now when I go ahead and select my green flag, now I'm able to move back and forth a lot easier now, huh, right? Look how much smoother that is. So let's go ahead and add in the up and down arrows. So go ahead and grab another if then block. The reason I'm not duplicating it is because I'm switching more things in this if then statement. So let's go ahead and talk about that a little more. So now when I have my up arrow, right, we're going to go ahead and change what by what. So remember earlier in the video we talked about if I'm moving up and down, that would be the y-axis. So if we go to our motion blocks, we're going to change y by 10, right? But since we're going up on the y-axis, it's positive. So we're going to change y by +10, right? And we're going to duplicate that and make a couple more changes to it. So now we're going to switch it to the down arrow, right? But now since we're moving down in the y-axis, that's now the negative direction, right? So we're going to go ahead and change that to -10. So now when I go ahead and click on my green flag, now my sprite is able to move in any direction with little to no lag, which is pretty awesome. Check that out. So now that we got a sprite moving around, which is awesome, let's go ahead and give it a little more flavor. Let's give it some life. Let's give it some animations. So from the previous video, we talked more about animations on how we can create our costumes, edit costumes, and how we can have our sprite change costumes once our program starts. So this is what the code looks like. So if you want to see a more in detail explanation of how this was done, go ahead and go back to that video. But just to show you on how I did it, I already had all my costumes set up. So when my sprite is moving to the right, I have two animations for the right movement. So I have R1, aka right one, and then R2, aka right two, right? And I also have one for left, which is left one, and left two. Oh, let's go ahead and just edit that real quick. Flip horizontal. So that's how I had all my costumes set up, and this is what the code looked like. So now when I go ahead and create the green flag, now my sprite is able to move with some animations, which is pretty awesome, right? But it's kind of boring seeing my sprite walk on an empty stage, right? So let's go ahead and change our stage. So let's go ahead and click on stage, go to backdrops, and go ahead and select a backdrop from scratch. So in this case, I want my sprite walking on the beautiful beach of Malibu. Go ahead and delete this backdrop because I will no longer be using it. So now when I go back to my sprite, my code's still here. So now when I go ahead and click that green flag, now my sprite is getting a beautiful view of Malibu. And who doesn't like the view of the beach, right? So that concludes this video. So go ahead and respond with either a screenshot or a video of your sprite moving with some animations and having it in a different backdrop. All right. Hope everyone has a good rest of their day, and I'll see you on the next video.